So why is the development of growth plans so challenging? Well, I would suggest to you that it involves three very human kinds of capabilities that we have to think about as entrepreneurs. The first one is analytical thinking. Are you constantly reading the market and being analytical about what's going on so that you can respond to the directional trends that will allow you to grow your business? Second, do you do that with a passion? Do you love doing what you do? And finally, are you utilizing your gut instinct when you're up at night thinking about how to grow your business to make your business more valuable? Now, as you're growing your business, you've got to be mindful of some fundamentals around creating a growth plan. So I'm going to talk a little bit about customers to be avoided. What this particular slide tells you is that there are two primary domains that you develop customers in. One goes to the ability to serve your customers. The second is the attractiveness of those customers. So what you have to be mindful of and avoid is situations where you have a low ability to serve a customer and that customer has low attractiveness. We call customers that fall into that domain time wasters. For those customers that might be very, very attractive, but you have very low ability to serve them, they can be reputation destroyers. So I want you to be mindful of that. You don't want to represent or work as a supplier to customers that are too large, even though they might be very attractive customers, but ultimately they could destroy your business because of the dynamics of economics or just because of the dynamics of working with a customer that you do not have a high ability to serve. On the other hand, creating a growth plan with ideally targeted customers involves operating in those same two domains, but in the first instance, it may be a customer that's not extremely attractive, but you have a very high ability to serve them. We tend to call these kinds of customers cash cows. They generate cash flow for your business, and they are not to be ignored. In addition to that, you may have highly attractive customers that you also have by virtue of your core competency, capacity, and operating strategies, the ability to serve extremely well. And those are where your super success stories come from. So high attractiveness of the customer and high ability to serve, those are your ideal customers. And if you're developing a growth plan, those are the customers you want to target. As you look at your business as a whole, you should be constantly evaluating whether you have prospective reputation destroyers and time wasters, and move away from them and adjust your aspirational opportunities towards super success stories and cash cow type customers. So now you have your super success stories and your cash cows. How are you going to work those customers to grow your business? Well, if they are at the prospect level, the question that you should be asking is, what is the buying process of that particular prospect? Will the target create profitability and long-term growth opportunities? Can you expect that they present a market opportunity and size and spend that's optimal for your product or service. What is their onboarding process? This can be a very important issue in determining whether you have a high ability to serve that particular customer. And remember, you want customers that are both attractive, but that you have a high ability to serve. Can you identify key competitors that you may have to find yourself being compared to when you're approaching customers? Is your product or service a true solution for that customer? If you can't answer that question with a yes, they may not be an optimal customer for your business. And then finally, what is the customer's degree of complexity and cost for you to onboard them in your firm or company? As you're asking these questions, depending on the answers, this can create a process matrix for you to make decisions about whether you're dealing with a reputation destroyer, a time waster, a success story, or a cash cow. So you need to develop tools that will give you the ability to effectively prospect and bring in optimal customers to your business as part of your growth plan. The other thing that is very important is to build relationships once you've made the decision that you're going to move towards building a partnering relationship with your customers. So it's not enough to know the prospect's name. You've got to be working with their purchasing group. We encourage you to also find out whether they have diversity resource people who can help give you wonderful insights into what's going on in that company. If you are making parts or products, you may need to know the engineering division or the end users of the company that you're doing business with. You also want to make sure that you understand their operations, their quality culture, and if you can build a relationship into the C-suite of your customers, now you've made the kind of penetration that will make for a long-term relationship, and you have the great potential for creating success stories with those customers. Let's talk about creating a growth plan. How do you do that with your customers? Well, first, when you're going into a customer and you're having conversation, you want to have in your mind that you're going to share insight with that customer. That means telling a prospective customer something they don't know that they can find helps them run their business better and achieve their key objectives better. In order to provide these kinds of insights with prospective customers, you have to do your homework and really understand their business. Next, it's important that as you engage your customers, that you have in mind what kind of financial impact they will have if they don't work with you. So quantify the numbers. Make sure that when you are working with your prospective customers, that you develop a clear story of financial impact if they work with you. Make sure you're quantifying the numbers so that you can help them understand. Are they achieving cost savings working with you? What do the numbers say in terms of financial impact? Finally, always remember to tell the prospect what their world would be like if they're not working with your company. They want to know why working with you will bring positive impact to their company. It might be through innovation, it might be through cost savings, it might be through cost avoidance, but you need to be prepared to reveal why your solutions result in those kinds of value to your customers. As you are developing scaling opportunities to grow your business, there are some techniques we want to make sure that you're aware of. First, if you are working on an existing product in an existing market, that should be an element of a comfort zone for you. And that should involve the lowest risk in working with your customers. But when you move your product into new markets, now the risk goes up, and you should be mindful of that. The risk increases even more when you're taking a new product into your existing market. Finally, if you make the decision that you're going to take new products into new markets, now you are in the highest risk activity. So you have to evaluate risk when you're working to scale your business. Very important that you count the costs and the risk in taking these types of actions. I wanted to share with you some attributes of leaders who scale. These attributes tend to exist in entrepreneurs who listen and seek input from others and are willing to shift their outlook depending on what's going on in the marketplace. It tends to be leaders who can quickly deal with problems, weed out non-performers. Leaders who can scale can often see past distractions and establish solid strategic priorities. They can also make concerted, sometimes uncomfortable, efforts for the sake of internal and external stakeholder interests. Another important attribute of leaders who can scale are those who learn to work with and communicate with diverse employees, customers, and other constituencies and stakeholders. Finally, leaders who scale tend to be those who make the company's continuous health one of their top priorities. We're now going to shift to what we call inorganic growth techniques. I hope that you will embrace the notion that in addition to the organic growth techniques that we've just covered, that you will think hard about how your business can engage in what we call inorganic growth techniques. The techniques of inorganic growth are fundamentally three areas. The first one is strategic alliances. The second one is joint ventures. And the third are acquisitions and mergers. Now, many people mix up strategic alliances and joint ventures, so I'm going to carefully walk you through the definition of a strategic alliance versus the definition of a joint venture so that you'll be clear about these very important techniques. Now, party one in a strategic alliance figures out that they can add value to another party, and that second party agrees. And so they come together, both adding value in a contract or an agreement between the parties. Now, there are three things you got to do right to have a successful strategic alliance. First is partner selection. You've got to take the time to make sure that that partner is adding value to what you're trying to do in the marketplace. And similarly, you should be able to add value to what they would otherwise do in the marketplace. The second is make sure you have a good contract. So the quality of your strategic alliance agreement is very important. Third, make sure that the management of both partners in the strategic alliance are in constant communication and management of the alliance. I'm going to share with you the basic structure of a strategic joint venture. Unlike a strategic alliance, a strategic joint venture is created when one party joins with another party. They both believe they're adding value, but they literally create a third-party entity. And they agree on how they're going to share profits. So I like to say that strategic alliances is somewhat like dating. It gives you the opportunity to get to know a partner, but you haven't created a third party that has its own identity and own interest. In strategic alliances, your agreement can have a term, and when it terminates, you can part ways, and typically you will not have the complexity that you would experience if you've entered into a joint venture where you create a third-party entity that might have employees and customers that now depend on input that both you and your partnering entity have to share. The final technique of inorganic growth are mergers and acquisitions. Now, some of the things that I'm going to say about each of these are true for the other. But typically, a merger is when two companies are reasonably equal, come together, and they're doing it because it's going to make both companies stronger. They're each going to have greater capabilities and higher quality of what they do in the marketplace. So the surviving entity in a merger will typically strip off some of the unimportant elements that both parties have, and it'll produce a bright and shiny new entity that, again, is stronger, more capable, and of higher quality. Acquisitions in their intent are when one company acquires another and really has the desire to control it to get bigger, get better quality, more capability, and more value. And like I said, both of these techniques for growth have similar attributes, but now you've been introduced to mergers and acquisitions. I hope this presentation has been helpful to you. My goal was to help you in developing your business growth strategy. And I want you to remember, start with a purpose that addresses a specific need. You can't do that unless you have learned some things about how to read the market. Consider current events, data, case studies, and trends. And then think through your strategy, and remember, you're always going to be recalibrating it on an ongoing basis. Also remember, link your business growth strategy to the capabilities you're able to secure to generate cash flow and profitability. When you think of your business in a formulistic way, as described in these terms, business growth strategy, capabilities, and cash flow or profitability, and you're linking them, you are not going to make the mistakes that many entrepreneurs make when they forget about the importance of how these elements work together. Also remember, link your business growth strategy and capabilities to how you're developing enterprise value. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're trying to develop wealth as entrepreneurs. And if you aren't mindful of enterprise value, you will make decisions that don't promote it. Be strategic in utilizing organic growth techniques. Remember to develop a toolbox full of tools on how you engage your customers, what you understand about them, how you develop relationships with multiple elements of their companies so that you are thought of as a partner to your customers. Use wisdom and business scaling techniques. Remember what we talked about with respect to the high-risk moves that entrepreneurs are often faced with. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's just important that you understand and you count the cost of those potential risks. Finally, develop agility in utilizing inorganic growth techniques. So you have 4 basic options for increasing capacity and to grow your business: organic growth and inorganic growth techniques. We've covered the organic growth techniques, and we also talked about strategic alliances, joint ventures, and strategic mergers and acquisitions. The final thing I'll say about strategic alliances, strategic joint ventures, and strategic mergers and acquisitions is that they all should be strategic, not just common transactions.